All right, what's up, folks? Welcome back. We are here for Game 2 of the NBA Finals. Denver Nuggets, Miami Heat. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder at Occupy Fantasy, joined once again by Chuck Silver, our lead analyst for the NBA at Occupy Fantasy. Chuck, I texted you like 30 minutes ago. I was like, yo, you want to talk about some NBA for 15 minutes? You said you're down, so here you are. What's up, man? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. We had no basketball for a couple days, so just excited to get back into it. They changed the pricing a little bit, so it's not just the same as the last slate. There are some different things we can talk about, so pretty excited to get into it.
All right, let's do it. What was the reason, really quickly, why there was 3 days off in between Game 1 and Game 2?
During the finals, I'm pretty sure they do 2 days off in between either way, but maybe something with the Stanley Cup Finals.
Oh,
I
potentially.
don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, that makes
Yeah,
sense. Let's
yeah, I
see.
think they should be getting 2 days off anyway. I mean, we want to see the best quality of basketball, right?
I mean, I agree. I totally agree with you. Totally agree. So, let's see. We got people in the chat already. Abe, T Nasty, the Deuce. What's up, fellas? What's going on? If you have questions, again, it's gonna be a 15-minute show, so 6:45 ish. We'll be out of here. Quick hits. Not a ton has changed from Game 1, although we did get some news. Basically, right before we went live, so we'll jump into that pretty quickly. But first, we'll answer the questions. You guys will drive the show, so questions you have in the chat, throw them in. We'll answer them. Abe says, Chuck, what is your best captain for a cash build? So I guess both sides. Jokic obviously is FanDuel. What about DraftKings?
Yeah, I think Jokic for MVP on FanDuel for cash for sure, and then for tournaments, you could get to Jimmy a little bit there, but it's mostly going to be Jokic no matter what, an MVP on FanDuel, I think. And then on DraftKings, Jokic, Bam, and it depends if you trust Eric Spoelstra to play Kevin Love more than 15 minutes or not. I'm not sure if Kevin Love is the best option for captain, but he's in the conversation now that we just got that news and his price is way down. So if he gets that 16 minutes, that he was getting before, then he's going to look pretty solid for that time.
And this is coming immediately off a game where Haywood Highsmith won people, what, $80,000, $90,000 in the big GPP on DraftKings. So I know a lot of people will probably either be willing to go back to him or try to imitate a similar strategy with Kevin Love this time around. So let's talk about it. Already a couple questions in the chat about Kevin Love. So right before we go live, Caleb Martin is not going to start. It's going to be Kevin Love. So you just briefly touched on him there, Chuck, but talk to me how that affects the entire slate.
Now that I say that again, I'm pretty sure for cash we want to go Bam or Jokic. Kevin Love is a great GPP captain option.
Okay.
I mean, his price is 2K on DraftKings, and he's going to get at least the first rotation. If he's not awful, he's going to play 5-6 minutes at the very least. Hopefully, he starts the second half, unless Caleb Martin comes in and starts doing what he was doing against Boston. But so we're playing Kevin Love at captain, not because we're hoping he's going to put up the 20 plus fantasy points. Obviously, that would be awesome, and he would be the optimal captain if he goes for 20 plus. But it's just so we can fit everyone else, because a big problem on the previous slate was Jokic and Jimmy were the same price on DraftKings, and so it just didn't make much sense to get to Jimmy when you could just get to Jokic, and it was hard to fit them both in. But today, both their prices came down, and Jimmy's even less. And so the power of having Kevin Love, or I mean, if you really want to get to Haywood Highsmith, I'm not sure he's a great captain option. Um, but it just allows you to fit the rest of the other good players in here, because there's, I talked about it last time. There's a lot of players here who are capable of putting up 30 fantasy points, 40 fantasy points. So it's kind of weird getting to the cheap guys. I'm not sure we want to get to too many of the cheap guys. Christian Brown, Jeff Green, Cody Zeller. I mean, these guys only have to outscore Kevin Love or Haywood Highsmith by a fantasy point. But with the way the rotations were and the way the game was, it's a little bit hard for me to see that now.
I gotta say, I know you and I talked about Zeller on stream before Game 1, and then watching
Hmm.
him on the court. And my first thought was this guy does not belong on the court in this series. Just watching that, but again, everyone who did watch that is going to have the same opinion. So that provides some leverage in GPPs. And you look at the pricing. Highsmith was what? Correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck. 1,400 in the utility spot on DraftKings.
Hmm.
Now he's up to 3,200. So that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and we've talked about the exact scenario in the previous game where the cheap, basically min-price guy is at captain, and then you just fit everyone else in, and that ended up being up the winner. Haywood Highsmith was 0.5% owned in the captain.
Yep.
We haven't projected for 0% in the captain today. I have a hard time believing that. Like you said, he was the optimal captain last time. I wouldn't be surprised to see it as high as 5% maybe. Um, but I think he's an okay option. He's not someone that I'm dying to get to, but I might force in a lineup or two with Haywood Highsmith at captain. But either way, he's a good utility play, because we saw also what, like, kind of how the Lakers guarded Denver with putting Rui on Jokic and letting AD kind of be that rover. The Heat did the same thing. They put Highsmith on Jokic and they let Bam kind of just play the help defense, and it worked out really well. When Highsmith was on the court, that's why he closed. So I don't expect him to hit those threes again, but he will get playing time today. It's just a matter of how they do in his first rotation if he's going to come back in again.
Fair enough. So I'm not as well versed in these rotations. In fact, I'm not versed at all. But how does Kevin Love starting? Does that impact Highsmith's minutes potentially, or does it not matter as much?
I'm not sure what they're going to do now because now, I mean, the obvious thing that they're going to do is put in Caleb Martin at the power forward, but I don't know if they're going to put Caleb Martin on Jokic like they did Highsmith. But and then the other thing is Cody Zeller still going to get those backup center minutes because, I mean, we were pretty confident he was going to play, and I think he played almost, 8 minutes, and he put up a fantasy point. So, like you said, I'm not sure we want to get back to Cody Zeller, but if they don't play Cody Zeller at all, then those minutes will probably go to Highsmith.
Fair enough. And I just refreshed the Occupy model, which if you're not familiar with and you're watching this, it's our real-time player dashboard that updates every couple of minutes for NBA, provides rankings for FanDuel and DraftKings, as well as Yahoo. And it just updated a few minutes ago as we were live. Kevin Love is now the top value option, unsurprisingly. And Chuck, we have him for 15 minutes. That sounds about right in your eyes?
Yeah, 15, 16 minutes is probably the correct projection. But the thing is, I don't know how much potential he really has to play more than 20 minutes. And even because he's starting, is he going to close? Because I imagine they're going to close with one of Caleb Martin or Highsmith. But he's so cheap that even if he doesn't close, he could still be a really good flex play.
For sure. Giano in the chat says, who is the biggest fish play? Any thought? Is it Highsmith? People going back to him at $2,000 more?
I don't know if Highsmith is a fish play, but he's the guy who's going to be chased the most. Yeah, like his ownership is going to be higher than he deserves, I think, compared to everybody else on the board. But I get it. You know, we have him projected for 11 minutes if he plays. What did he play last game? He played 23 minutes last game. Like if he gets up to 23 minutes, then he's probably going to do enough while he's on the court.
Fair enough. I mean, you look at the differences in minutes, right? So 23 doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play 23 again in game 2, but 9 minutes in the last game against Boston, then 36 the game before that, and then 2 and 5 in those other games. So, pretty big differences here. And the model has picked up on the price difference. Obviously, he's now the worst ranked value of guys expected to play 5 minutes or more. So that should tell you all you need to know. All right, guys, we're here for another 5 or 6 minutes. Get any final questions in here. Again, game 1, game 2, not a huge difference. Kevin Love is the biggest difference, obviously. But Chuck, based on what you saw in game 1, based on what you and I talked about before that game, has anything changed in your mind? How these teams are approaching the games, your opinions of players or rotations? Basically, has anything changed from pre-game 1 to post-game 1?
Not really. You know, I had some leans on Max Strus and KCP as good GPP plays last time, and neither of them worked out, but I'm going to go right back to KCP. Max Strus, I'm still going to get there a bit, but I'm not as confident. I mean, he shot 0 for 9. He's not going to shoot over 9 from 3 again.
Yeah, really quickly, that was a big thing that stood out to me. We talked about him. He was over 10 from the field, and I think his price dropped a little bit. But like you said, he put up 11 fantasy points without making a single field goal. So you got to assume that regresses in some fashion.
And to me, I kind of look that as, that's just in the range of outcomes, I guess. I mean, it's an extreme outcome to shoot over. But the fact that he got up 9 threes, like he was a good GPP play. Typically, he's going to make 3 or 4. If he has a good shooting night, 5 or 6. And he scored 11 fantasy points without that. I mean, that puts him in the optimal lineup if that happens.
Absolutely. Quincy says Lowry played pretty well. Thoughts on him? Yeah, as much as people were shitting on him, and a lot of people in the chat, even just as recently as before game 1. But you called it out, veteran experience, and he was in the optimal lineup, right? He was in the optimal or second optimal, whatever it was. But anyway, he played a pretty decent game. What are your thoughts on him tonight?
I like going back to him again. He had a poor first half rotation, but he came in towards the end of the third quarter with 4 minutes left, and he played the rest of the game. He didn't check out till 30 seconds left when the game was lost. So, like I mentioned, that veteran experience and having I did say something about him and Gabe Vincent not sharing the court as much in the Boston series, but they shared the court a lot in game 1, and they would have both been optimal if it wasn't for Haywood Highsmith going off. And so I think it's okay to have them in the same lineup again. Kyle Lowry, the veteran experience in the finals, and then Gabe Vincent. There's something about his defense, and I'm not using that as something that I'm going to reduce Jamal Murray's projection, but it's just something that's going to keep Gabe Vincent on the court. And like I mentioned last time, if like we just want to play the guys who are going to be on the court, and Gabe Vincent played 38 minutes versus Lowry's 26, and so Gabe Vincent is probably the stronger play at the similar price on DraftKings, but Kyle Lowry I think is a really good play too.
Fair enough. And yeah, both of those guys were ranked 1 and 2 in the optimal lineup on DraftKings in game one. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out again this time. And then we got a couple questions about FanDuel because Kevin Love is min price over there. Let's bring up the Occupy model once more. Just 6K, which is normally reserved for guys who don't really see the court that much. But Chuck, he's 6K over there. Historically, and when I say historically, I mean the lineups I've looked at throughout this playoffs and only, really don't get many guys under 7,500, 8K even in the optimal lineup on FanDuel. So what does that mean for Kevin Love at 6K? I mean, because you figure even Highsmith, who outperformed all expectations and efficiency in game one, wasn't in the optimal lineup on FanDuel, despite how many points he scored. So what does Kevin Love have to do? And if he is in, what kind of salary can you leave to be different?
So the way that, kind of like DraftKings too, the way Kevin Love's in the optimal is not from him going off. Like obviously if he goes off, that's great, but it's by allowing you to fit the three guys who, like let's say Jokic, Jimmy, and Jamal outscore everyone else. The next highest score is Bam, like 10, 12 fantasy points below them. Like those three are going to be the top three spots, and then it's just whichever two guys put up fantasy points in the bottom. So it's basically, I think if you're playing the cheap guys besides Kevin Love on FanDuel, maybe Duncan Robinson's a decent pivot too. You're kind of just hoping that the guys that you play in MVP, Star, and Pro have such ceiling games, I guess. Not necessarily ceiling games, but just outperforming everyone else by quite a bit where no one else can match the raw fantasy points from those guys.
Fair enough. And we haven't talked about him yet. You mentioned him in our pregame one show, Jimmy Butler. You mentioned, you were spot on. Really difficult chance for him to see the optimal. He was going to come in lower owned than we projected as far as ownership goes. But now his price has dropped, as you mentioned. So has your thoughts changed on him? And how do we see Butler versus Joker this time around?
On DraftKings, their prices are better now. I'm still not getting to Jimmy as much. I actually had to force him. I had to put him in exposure to get to more Jimmy. I was hardly getting him. It's just we want to get to Jokic over Jimmy mostly. I mean, if this is a 7-game series, how many times out of 7 does Jimmy Butler outscore Nikola Jokic? Maybe once. And then Jamal Murray and Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo's price on DraftKings, I think, is too cheap. I'm not that big of a fan of Bam, but he took 25 shots last game. He's not going to take 25 shots again. He also didn't get to the free throw line. And so Bam at his price is probably one of the better plays on DraftKings. But with Jimmy being so close to Jamal, it's really tough. On FanDuel, it's a little bit different because Jimmy Butler's only $500 more than Jamal and only $1,500 more than Bam, but he's going to project much better over there. So it's a little bit different. But on DraftKings, I don't know. I'm having a tough time getting to Jimmy. He did turn his ankle again, and it's something with the last few games. His drives per game are down, which makes his points per drive down, or just points off of driving period is down. And so, like, he's kind of hurt. He's still Jimmy Butler. He can still take over, but I don't know. I'm having a tough time getting there. I really like the mid-range plays that we talked about. Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry. I'm going to give KCP another shot, and then MPJ looks pretty good too.
Fair enough. And good stats there with the drives being reduced on Jimmy Butler. Give some context to his performances. All right, guys, we're closing down the show here pretty shortly. Aaron has a question. Is Zeller more likely to take the backup 5 minutes?
I'm not sure because now that once they put Highsmith on Jokic last game, I don't think Zeller saw the court again. Or maybe he saw, let me just see real quick. Okay, so Zeller did see a quick 2-minute rotation at the end of the third after they put Highsmith on Jokic, but I'm not sure if they're going to do that again with Kevin Love in the starting lineup now. So Zeller's kind of risky. And the thing is that even if Cody Zeller plays 8 minutes, if he gives you 2 fantasy points, you're dead. And he played seven minutes in game one. Everyone saw him get destroyed by Jokic. And so even though he's cheap, the only way he's in the winning lineup tonight is if like the scoring is so top heavy with a few guys that his 2 fantasy points is necessary just from the 1,200 salary.
Fair enough. You mentioned really quickly Adebayo shooting 25 shots or whatever it was. I think I saw on Twitter, and I can't verify how credible this source was, that potentially that was the defensive game plan from Denver. Let Bam shoot as much as he wants. Any credibility to that that theory? And if so, is it possible that continues?
Yes, actually. So if watching the game, most of Bam's points came from that little 10 to 15 kind of like short jump shot, maybe like little floater area. And he didn't shoot any free throws. He wasn't really, he had a few plays inside, but yeah, I mean, the 0 free throws is really telling on the type of shots he took. I don't have a shot chart up right now, but I'm sure it's a lot of those little 10, 15 footers, and he's not usually open for those. Like those big men capable of making those should not be open. But
Right.
yeah, it did seem like Jokic was just kind of playing off. And that's another thing, just real quick about Jokic. People think he's bad on defense. He's really not bad on defense. He's a big person. He's a good defensive player. And so, like I said, I do like Bam though. The usage was sky high, but he's not going to take 25 shots again.
Okay. Fair enough. Over under 16 and a half. Is that too high for game 2? Shot
I
attempts?
might still take the over on that.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Field goals attempted. Bam. Oh, okay, it's at 15. Just 15 today, and
All right.
so that tells you a lot. Vegas has him for 10 less field goal attempts than last game, and he got most of his fantasy points from. Well, I guess not. He only had 20. Like he had like 26 real life points, but it's because he didn't shoot free throws. So don't look at that as being bad. It's a good thing.
Fair enough. All right, guys, that'll do it for this show. We appreciate you tuning in as always. If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up. If we get as many thumbs up, we'll see if we can do a Game 3 stream. And let us know in the comments and on Twitter and in Discord if you appreciate this stream. That'll let us know. Mostly let Chuck know that you appreciate his thoughts and that you want to see this for the remaining final game. So follow Chuck on Twitter at ChuckSilverDFS. I'm sure he'll be back this week with an NFL best ball video. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel here. It's free. You'll get notified when we go live, upload any videos for any sports. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian Jester FF. You can follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Thanks for listening and good luck in Game 2 of the NBA